this is a really quick 2-minute review of everything we did in Geometry Concepts A. This is not everything. In order to get everything, you do need to be coming to the Google Meet, where I talk about this at length and much slower. But the goal here is just to give you a really quick summary of some of the essential things before you do the homework. And you are required to watch this before jumping into the homework, which makes it just a refresher from the Google Meet. First thing that I want to talk about are congruences, which means that two things have equal measurement. If two things are congruent, they will be measured the same. This can be for angles, or it can be for segments. Okay? Keep in mind that we mark these things. If you have two segments that are congruent, that doesn't look quite congruent, they're going to have hash marks in them. Okay? If I have another segment over here and it also has a hash mark, all three of these are congruent. But if I have a fourth and a fifth, and these have two hash marks in them, that means that the three of these are all congruent to each other. They have the same measurement, and these two segments have the same measurement to each other. For angles, we do the same thing, except we do arcs. So if these have an arc through the two angles, that means that those two angles are going to be congruent. So that's something important to keep in mind. The next thing that I want to remind you of is Cpctc. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are themselves congruent. If I have two triangles, and I know by side, angle, side that these two are congruent, then that will also mean that these angles are congruent and these sides are congruent, because all parts of congruent triangles are themselves congruent. The last thing that I want to talk about really quickly are vertical and linear angles. Remember that if you have a line, you have 180 degrees, so that these two angles will add up to equal 180 degrees. If I have vertical angles, angles on the opposite sides of the vertical angles are congruent, so these two are congruent and these two are congruent. And then the last thing that I want to remind you of is that if you add up all of the angles in a triangle, you will get 180 degrees, 2 minutes and 20 seconds.